Thank you very much, Mr. Viola. Any questions? Hearing none? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, we're now going into the 5-minute rule. Let's see, the next person is Jasmine Gripper, Legislative Director of the Alliance for Quality Education. I'd like it from now on in if we could do 5 minutes on the clock. And would you please come down closer? The next person will be Bernadette Capin. So if you come closer, you'll be able to walk faster. And then after that would be Jasmine. Well, after that would be Tim Kelly. Ms. Gripper, yes.
Yes, thank you. Chairman Farrell, Chairman Kathy Nolan, the members of the legislature, thank you for having me here today. My name is Jasmine Gripper. I am the Legislative Director for the Alliance for Quality Education. Our organization is a coalition of parents, teachers, students, and community members from all across the state. In an attempt to be brief and efficient, I will not read my testimony in its entirety, but I will go through some key points I would like to highlight. It is unfortunate that the governor's budget...
Excuse me, the clock in front of you is working, though. You can see the clock?
Yes, I'm
okay.
It is unfortunate that the governor's executive budget proposal is grossly inadequate. $961 million sounds like a lot of money, but it is not enough for the 2.7 million students of New York State. The $266 million in foundation aid in his proposal seems like a bad joke when foundation aid should be our #1 priority. We all know that this is not enough to actually improve schools or close the funding gap between the poor and wealthy districts, which now stands at over $8,733 per pupil. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of the final court decision in the Campaign for Fiscal Equity lawsuit. It has been 10 years since the state highest court ordered the state to adequately fund our schools, and yet our schools are still owed $4.8 billion. And 72% of this funding is owed to high-need districts. This lack of adequate funding has perpetuated inequality across the state. It is important to note that our schools are not failing. It is the state that has been failing to fully fund our schools, and the state has been persistently failing for over 10 years. The Alliance for Quality Education is recommending an increase of $2.9 billion. This amount is necessary to maintain services and to provide vital programs from pre-K to grade 12. This funding would provide smaller class sizes, engaging curriculum materials, AP classes, electives like art, music, career and technical education, programs for English language learners, restorative justice practices to keep students in school instead of pushing them out, and to hire more school psychologists and social workers. I've heard one New York City teacher once comment, "We have iPhone children receiving a flip phone education." It is now up to you to make sure that our schools have a large enough increase, $2.9 billion, that's fairly distributed to comply with the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, to give kids a sound basic education, with 72% of it going to high-needs districts. In terms of community schools, we are pleased that the governor proposed funding for community schools, but $100 million is insufficient to create college-ready community schools. Last year, the governor and the legislature determined that $75 million was required for the 20 schools. Based on this cost, we should be providing $535 million for the 144 schools. In terms of pre-K, in 2014, New York State promised to provide full-day pre-K for every 4-year-old. This promise was fulfilled for New York City, but there are 115,000 4-year-olds without access to full-day pre-K in every region of the state. If I were an upstate or suburban legislator, I would be asking, where's my pre-K? We support the region's recommendation, and we urge you to add $125 million to expand high-quality full-day pre-K. I want to conclude with remarks on the 2% state spending cap. The governor imposed a 2% spending cap on the budget without any justification other than his desire for the talking point of reining in spending. But this cap has resulted to cuts in many vital state programs. At a time when New York State has record levels of children in poverty and billions in a recurring surplus, we urge you to disregard this cap and create a budget that works for all of us, and most importantly, our children. This is the year to make sure we get back on track with the campaign for fiscal equity. This is the year to provide $2.9 billion in state aid, with 72% of it going to high-needs districts. This is the year we can finally stand up for our kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great job, great testimony, great summary. We appreciate, we will make sure that everyone knows that you also talked about the voucher tax credit issue and the paid family leave and the DREAM Act and some of the others, but thank you for condensing it. And we, you know, we love working with AQE and we love working with you, Jasmine Gripper.
Likewise.
Thank you very, very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Bernadette Cappan, Chairperson, 4201 School Association, Tim Kelly, also. Next will be William Wolf, President. And then after that, Julie Marlett.
Brad, please start.
Yes.
Good afternoon. My name is Bernadette Cappan. I'm the Executive Director of the New York Institute for Special Education in the Bronx. And I have with me Vivian Hugita, a student at the Institute, and Tim Kelly, the Superintendent of St. Mary's School for the Deaf in Buffalo. I'm here today as a co-chair of the 4201 Association. As you know, we're 11 schools made up of schools for deaf, blind, and children with severe physical disabilities. And we service the entire state, Buffalo, Rochester, New York City area, including Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens. So we are not just located in one area, and we're proud to serve the state of New York. We submitted our testimony, and I'll just make a few comments. We are really pleased, and we thank each of you for supporting us each year in our efforts. Last year, we were really pleased to be able to receive the 2.4% increase that was applied to our budget, and this was the first increase that we had received in 6 years. The additional funding has helped us, but we're asking at this point in the process that we would be considered to be on par with the school districts. If there's an increase, we know there's a slight increase for the districts, that would be also shared with us. We have exceptional needs for our children. Many of the aids and devices that children need to be successful in school are quite expensive, and we want to make sure that they are up to par and that they're also being able to achieve at a high level. We were very pleased, and we thank so many of you for supporting us in the Smart Schools Bond Act several years ago, and that this will really help us provide the appropriate technology that our children need. So once again, we're really looking that we're able to increase our funds to be able to provide a high quality education. We can tell you that we have positive outcomes, and we've been listening to that today. Many of our schools, our children are on academic par. Some of the schools, the children have more significant disabilities, but they're achieving citizens. Our schools are able to tell you that we have a 100% graduation rate at our schools, and many of the students are going on to higher education and careers. So whatever you share with us, we try to pass on to the students to be as successful as they can. One issue that we have faced in our schools, one campus is celebrating its 200th anniversary this year. The New York Institute is celebrating 125 years. We ask you to consider a one-time investment of $11 million for deferred capital improvements, and this would be things like roof repairs, plumbing, different audio alerting devices in the schools for school safety. This is not cosmetic, it's totally to be able to provide appropriate health and safety for the students in the schools. I brought with me today Vivian, and I think she's the best example of why we really ask you to consider increasing our amount this year, because our children, someone like Vivian, is an individual who has been a leader in school. She's been involved in many different fundraisers at school for other charitable organizations. She's an athlete and an all-around scholar, and she'll share with you a few comments. So, Vivian?
Thank you, Dr. Cappan, and thank you, members of the legislature. My name is Vivian Higuita. I go to the New York Institute for Special Education. I have been a student at the Institute since 2003. And I live in College Point, Queens, with my family. And we cheer for the Mets and the Yankees.
All right.
My favorite subjects are math as well practical instruction that readies me for the real world. I am visually impaired. My vision is 20/250, and while I'm not blind, my vision is severely limited. And without the benefits of numerous surgeries, technologies, and specialized instruction, I would not be able to read, write, or conduct the everyday activities you may take for granted. With my right eye, I get to see, and with the help of several specialized devices, I can write and read. These include my handheld magnifier, a VisioBook to provide mobile magnification of written material, a Victor Stream to provide downloaded audio content, a telescope for assistance with long distance vision, such as in an auditorium or theater, and my iPad. These are essential devices for those who are visually impaired or with low vision, such as my classmates. Many of my classmates reside on our campus 5 days a week, while others, such as myself, get up each morning to board on a school bus. For each of us to succeed and to accomplish our future goals, we need a school such as the Institute to accommodate our needs, and the individualized instruction we receive from our teachers also helps us understand challenging materials. When I graduate from the Institute, it is my goal to enroll at Queens College, where I would like to study vocational education in the hope of providing the type of support to others that I have received. I am here today because I want to be a participant in the process. Today is my 18th birthday, and I am committed to lending my voice to advocate for my classmates and friends who are blind, deaf, or severely disabled. Thank you.
Well, happy birthday. We're thrilled that you spent it doing something for others and coming up to Albany, and thank you so much for being here today.
We'd say in summary then, we really hope that we support the increase that's been listed in the executive budget for us, to think about increased parity with the school districts and $11 million toward a one-time investment to improve our schools.
Mike, did you wanna-
I leave you with a quote from Helen Keller, where she says, "Life is either a great adventure or nothing at all." And that's what the 4201 schools are all about. Each day is an adventure for the students that we work with. They bring joy to us, and they will be outstanding citizens in the future. So thanks for hearing us.
Thank you. Mike, did you want to add a word? Are you going to add a word, Mr. Kelly?
No, just thank you for including us in the Smart Bonds Act that you did before. Thank
Mr.
you.
Rocco, just jump in. Thank you. Someone has
Just
a
as you get up, I just want to say, thank you. You guys are here every year, and I think the reason we're finally making progress with this is because of the outreach that has been done by, advocates, bringing your students out, having legislators visit, and just growing the understanding of what goes on in those schools. I happen to have, bordering on my district, Mill Neck up on the north part, and the Henry Viscardi School in the middle part of my district, and I visited them both several times. You're blown away every time, and we know that the investments we make there are going directly to providing opportunities for those students. So thank you for the work you do, and I know you have a lot of support amongst those of us sitting up here.
Thank you. We appreciate
Thank you.
everything
Thank
you
you.
do.
Thank you.
Next, Mr. William Wolf, President, New York State Coalition of 853 Schools. After him will be Julie Marletti, Director of Government Relations.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Bill Wolf, the Executive Director of Albany's LaSalle School, and also the President of the New York State Coalition of 853 Schools. And from where I sat, I could watch her clock, and I was glad to give her my time, at least part of it.
No, we'll take it.
Yeah, we appreciate the increasing awareness you all have for our schools among members of the legislature and your growing interest in understanding the valuable services we offer and the challenges we face. In the last few years, this has resulted in critically important consideration for growth in our funding that is in line with state-supported school aid, has assured our eligibility for important initiatives like the Smart Schools Bond Act, and more. In the complete testimony we shared, you'll see that we're seeking your support to build on this recent progress, first by assisting our schools in the recruitment, retention, and professional development of the highly qualified and certified teachers we employ. You will see that we are seeking continuation of the productive work underway with the State Education Department and the Division of the Budget with respect to reform of the tuition methodology that drives the funds for all of New York's 853 programs. And you will see that we are seeking a means to address growing deficiencies in the facilities we own and operate, knowing that a strategic approach to solving these issues today will prove beneficial in the long run. And additionally, in the days ahead, you will hear of our interest to secure resolution of the serious consequences for our programs that too often develop at the points where the policies and regulations of one monitoring state agency intersect, or it might be better to say collide, with those of another state agency also charged with similar responsibilities involving the children served in our programs. When we are all stuck, we need your help to unravel these circumstances so our programs are not unnecessarily placed at risk and the overall needs of children we care for remain our shared priority. On the whole, you'll see that we're seeking investments by government and opportunities to partner in order to ensure that the children we serve benefit from our state's long-standing commitment to education for its youngest citizens. The 853 schools throughout the state, including the 44 or so that are members of the 853 Coalition, serve about 15,000 school-age children and play a significant role in New York's priority of offering all of our children the opportunity to develop intellectually, socially, and emotionally. When we make these investments in child and family well-being, of which education is an absolutely essential component, we are in fact making an investment in the future prosperity of our communities. Schools like mine and others in the 853 Coalition work with seriously traumatized children. Sometimes we are described as their last chance or their only hope. What I know is how seriously wounded emotionally, intellectually, and very often physically the young people are that I see every day. Emerging science tells us that the future for many children can be seriously undermined when prolonged toxic stress damages the early architecture of the brain. For a child, the stress can come from a variety of sources, including physical abuse, sexual abuse, fear of violence, neglect due to caregiver substance abuse, and more. We know that the damage inflicted by adverse childhood experiences, or ACEs, can weaken the foundation of the neurological system. We know that ACEs can also seriously impair how the brain develops during adolescence. The Centers for Disease Control recently recognized ACEs as a public health concern, citing correlations to low rates of school completion, lack of adult employability, and sustained household poverty. When we invest in family well-being, which for children is anchored by education and includes such things as early childhood development and building resiliency in adolescence, we help to ensure that a child's neurological foundation will be more durable. Such durability contributes to the long-term opportunities a child has to fully participate in and contribute to the prosperity of his or her community. Across New York, 853 programs are among those on the leading edge of employing brain science to inform practice. For the children and families most at risk for long-term complications due to ACEs and toxic stress, we are helping them build resiliency, learn relevant skills, benefit from rigorous curriculum and instruction, and guide them towards stability so they may open the door to an independent and more prosperous life. This is what 853 schools do. And as a result of our continuing efforts and wise investments, it's what we all together do for our state's most vulnerable children. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak today.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Avenatti?
First of all, thank you for your efforts and what you do.
You're welcome.
I just want to understand, you're on a rate-based system?
Yes, we're on a tuition-funded system set by the state of New York and the Division of the Budget.
Are your
Historical
rates
rates.
the same thing as the special act schools? Is that the same
Exactly.
type of?
It's the same rate system that we're working collaboratively with State Ed and the Division of Budget to, we've made good progress with it. There's still more work to do.
Now, how many years did you go without a rate increase?
It was about five to six, depending, exactly how you look at it. And in the last 2 years, we've been catching back up.
Okay.
The system is running now, but of course, we had those years of zero, which really put a lot of us behind in trouble.
Is there anything in this budget particular reference to the 853 schools?
I'm not so sure so much in the budget itself. It's often handled, some of the funding, the rate methodology is actually handled outside of the budget process, but there is, on some cases, we've put legislation or legislative language in the budget, but, that's one of the opportunities for that.
Do you have any language that you would like us to?
I can see that it gets here from, yeah.
If you could.
Mm-hmm.
Thank
Sure.
you very much.
Okay.
Thank you. Julie Marlette, Director of Government Relations, Brian Fessler, New York State School Boards Association.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and next will be Robert Lowry. Yes.
So thank you so much for allowing us a few minutes to speak at the end of the day. You've all kept a great amount of energy given the lateness of the hour. And so in deference to that, I will take my shortened remarks and further truncate them, knowing that you have it in writing in front of you. My name is Julie Marlette. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the New York State School Boards Association. And we're here today to share with you what we've shared with you in writing, which is a request for a minimum increase of $2.3 billion over what was provided in the 2015 budget. Rather than break out a lot of numbers at this time of the day and repeat things you've heard before, I think I would start by answering questions I imagine would have been asked earlier and acknowledge that we understand we're asking for a great deal. But a great deal is what we believe is needed to allow our districts to provide the services and programs that our students need to succeed. There's been a great deal of discussion today about what it takes to be a successful school in the college and career-ready programs, including CTE, services for ELLs, and other specified programs, especially in our most struggling schools. And we agree that those additional influxes of aid are needed for those specified programs. We support the CTE salary increase. We support special services aid increases. We support directed funding to our struggling schools and for the building of community schools. But at its base, unless we make a significant investment in the general operating aid for our districts, all of these dedicated streams will continue to be a patch rather than a solution. We would request that there be $1.5 billion in additional foundation aid this year, and that we eliminate the gap elimination adjustment. The blending of these two aids is critically important to ensure that we provide aid to all types and kinds of districts, and we further hope to see, at a minimum, every district be held harmless and receive at least the funding they received in the 2015 budget. State aid is more important than ever this year because, as you've heard ad nauseum, we have essentially 0% tax cap. 0.12% leaves little, if any, ability for our locals to raise revenue at the local level through their tax levies. While we certainly won't have final numbers for a number of weeks, if you simply look at that calculation against the median tax levy in the state, you're talking about a potentially $18,000 increase. I think when we look at the inflationary costs and increases that we're faced with, we can all realize that that's not really going to cover our costs. And that what we further want to acknowledge that the state has been incredibly thoughtful and generous in trying to drive as much money as possible towards education in recent years. We also have to acknowledge that the devastating cuts in the recent years, going back to the height of the financial crisis, put us at such a low funding level that those increases have not been enough to keep pace with the inflationary costs that we've faced. In addition, we would ask you to consider the following. Each year when you make an appropriation, we know that you put forth a number that you hope to see go to public education. But that, like so many other things in the budget-making process, is based at least partially on some estimates and guessworks, based on the data that we provide, based on what we expect to see in the coming year. However, if situations change, data change, reporting changes, looking at our reimbursable aid categories, there could be some money left at the end of each year. We would hope that this year you could consider including language in the budget that would direct any monies left that were appropriated for the support of public schools to go directly to public schools, whether it's in further paying down of prior year claims, whether it's further money for the GEA and foundation aid, or towards any of the dedicated programs that we've outlined in our proposal for English language learners, for districts dealing with enrollment spikes, for expansion of pre-kindergarten, or anything else that would really help our schools succeed. At that, I'll use just a few seconds to say thank you again. Certainly happy to answer any questions you may have, and give a closing message to one of our members, the Chancellor. We too are celebrating College Recognition Day, as we do every Wednesday, in honor of the excellent public university education we received as both undergraduates and graduates here at UAlbany.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Councilman Nabinanti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's one topic I've been raising over and over again, that's special education.
Yeah, you are going to stop at some point, right?
Yes, I will.
Try tonight.
But there's one group of schools that has not been represented here today. And there are about 10 special act schools in the state or so, and I represent more than half of them. And I'm understanding from them that they're in desperate straits. Their funding formula is similar to the 853 schools. Can you discuss their situation? Do you represent them?
I represent a number of them. They are funded through the same rate methodology as the 853 schools. As my predecessor mentioned, there's been a great deal of work, and much like all other public schools, they were impacted significantly by the recession and have just started to come out of that now with increases in the last several years. We continue to work with them and the department to refine the methodology to ensure that it actually meets their needs.
Just so we put it on the record very quickly, my understanding is their methodology is such that they get this year's rate based on their costs of 2 years ago.
At the highest level, that's correct.
Okay. And secondly, that they do not get in their rates, they do not receive what might be called indirect costs, costs that include electricity and pensions and other increases like that don't get factored in. Are you familiar with that problem?
Direct and indirect costs are both included, they are weighted, and there's a balance that has to go on. From there, it becomes a lot more complicated a lot more quickly, but there is a balance that has to be considered between those two cost categories.
Okay, because they're asking for special legislation to correct that problem, because I'm understanding some of the special act schools have actually borrowed monies to meet operating costs and now can't pay back the loans.
My understanding is that both the special acts and the 853s generally do have to operate under RANs, revenue anticipation notes, so that they are able to meet their costs due to cash flow issues throughout the year.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Robert Lowry, Deputy Director, New York State Council of School Superintendent. After him will be Michael Borges, Executive Director.
Chairwoman Young, Chairman Farrell, Chairwoman Nolan, and other members of the Assembly and Senate, I'm Robert Lowry, Deputy Director of the State Council of School Superintendents. I'll try to make 7 points pretty quickly. First, thank you for your past support, and please know that it makes a difference. Every year since 2011, we've been doing surveys of superintendents about the financial conditions of their schools. This was the first year we've ever had more superintendents say their condition improved rather than worsened. And the survey also shows that they see improvements in specific program areas, instruction at each of the grade levels. There are still worries. 69% of superintendents say they're worried about their district's reliance on reserves to pay recurring costs. And the concerns are typically deepest among the superintendents leading the poorest school districts. Second, superintendents, their boards, and business officials are still evaluating how the new budget, the governor's budget, might affect the choices they have to present to voters in May. But the primary reaction we see so far is discouragement. They're worried that positions and programs that they were finally able to begin restoring this year, they may have to turn around and cut back next year. Third, the allowable increase under the property tax cap really permits only a minuscule level of help to schools. It's 0.12%. With that, less than half the districts, over half the districts cannot raise $25,000 in additional support, and less than a quarter of the districts in the state could raise enough money to save the job of an early career teacher with typical compensation. Fourth, end the gap elimination adjustment. It was born in the depths of the Great Recession when the state faced huge budget gaps. Those are gone. It's time for the GEA to be gone. The chart on the bottom of page 5 of my testimony indicates a couple things about the GEA and about school aid in general. The gray bars show how much districts are losing this year per pupil from the GEA. The blue bars show how much they'd still be losing if the governor's budget were enacted. It shows that average need districts, your typical upstate suburban districts, are being hurt the most by what's left of the GEA. But the chart shows something else. Look at the high need rural districts. If we fully eliminated the GEA, they'd only get $13 more per pupil, and they'd only get $1 more per pupil above what the governor has proposed in his budget. So we need increases in foundation aid. And that's the next point I would make. With a restrictive property tax cap and with no further action on mandate relief, schools will continue to need really strong state support. The foundation aid formula was an underappreciated accomplishment in public policy. It promised the neediest districts the greatest aid per pupil and promised all districts more predictable state support going forward. Some of its assumptions do need to be revisited. We also urge revisiting the tax cap. Everyone seems to think it's 2%. Make 2% the threshold for requiring a 60% supermajority for voter approval. The last thing I'll say is, given the need to prioritize funding concerns in schools, we were encouraged that this budget does not present new reform initiatives for us to debate and potentially for our members and other local leaders and teachers to implement. I want to say we're also encouraged by our interactions with Commissioner Elia and the team she's assembling at the State Education Department. They need to be given the time and the financial support to make the administrative and regulatory changes that can improve our state's education policies. Thank you for your time, and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions.